back. There's a lot of buzz, obviously, in the world about AI and AI training, large language models, and all the things they can do for you. There's plenty of rumors out there about people doing their homework with AI and actually doing quite well with it. So today I wanted to do a quick, well, semi-quick video about a model that I ran and how you've got to check your numbers. AI is great for research. It can provide an immense amount of data and crunch an immense amount of numbers in very short time, and it can also do it very wrong. So here's what I did. I was looking for some information on cell towers and how much rent each company pays on the cell towers just for a project that I was in the middle of. And so what I told AI to do, and this is Perplexity, was search the web and SEC filings for ticker symbol AMT, that's American Tower. Identify the amount of rent paid by each tenant and the subtenant on towers owned by and or controlled by American Tower. It did a great job. It went out, it started pulling the SEC filings, found the stock, it did a ton of research that isn't necessarily accurate. And then it came in, American Tower pays approximately this much, and then it went into Mexico, Dish Network, Verizon, overall lease rents. And the data it came back with was exact rent paid by each individual tenant and subtenant is not publicly disclosed. Well, that's great. That's what I knew. What I wanted it to do then was go a little bit more granular into extrapolating the data from the SEC filings and other factual information found online. Estimate the average rent paid per tenant per tower. It was able to come in and do that by saying, well, they report an average of this amount per tower and an average tenants of 2.2 per tower, therefore the average tenant would be paying X. Now, this number is going to vary tremendously depending on where the tower is located, who's on the tower, how important the tower is to the coverage in the area. There's a lot of variables in there. But I wanted it to give me a general idea, and for the purposes of what I was looking at, that was great. Then I had it run the same analysis for ticker symbols SBAC, that is SBA Communications, and CCI, which is Crown Castle. Output the data for all three companies in a table. If possible, break the rents down further by wireless carrier paying rent. And it came back, it was not able to break it down per wireless carrier, which I know because they're not going to provide that information. That is actually very proprietary information that is not readily available. But it gave me this being the average rents per tower. That looked about like what I expected it to be, except then I started looking at some of these numbers. Now, I was looking for the US market. It knew I was looking for the US market, but it's coming out with 148,000 towers by American Tower. Well, I kind of know that that's the number of global towers they own, not the number of US towers they own. It did try to break it down a little bit more by the wireless carriers, but it's not able to do so. So I abandoned that portion of the search and I said, well, check out the American Tower SEC filings and verify the US-based towers. So what you're seeing with these AI models is you've got to be very specific with the prompts. You can't give it a general idea and expect it to come back with a specific result. You've got to be very specific. So I told it to go out and do that, and it came back and said, oh yeah, oops, they only have 42,000 US-based towers, not 148,000 towers. Okay, good. Well, let's revise those earnings and come back and see what that looks like. And again, the math comes back a little bit different. Now, here's the amazing thing. It was able to do this in a matter of seconds. It's going out and looking at the results. But you have to have a baseline amount of knowledge. Otherwise, you're going to get garbage in and garbage out. If I were to present a report based on simply the outputting results, it's not going to look great. Now, I went a little bit further. I wanted to create a printable summary. It did that. Everything was kind of cool. Other than I didn't want to export it to a PDF format, I had to figure out how to do that on my own. And then I said, well, here's something I did. I went over to Copilot. Now, Copilot, of course, is Microsoft's AI engine. And I had Copilot run this through to tell me what it looked like. And I was expecting it to come back with similar results. But it actually went out and searched the web. Now I said, search the web in SEC filings for ticker symbol AMT, again, American Tower, identify the amount of rent paid by tenant. So I did not give it as specific of a prompt as I did otherwise. And it tells me the same thing. American Tower doesn't publicly break this down, but it came back and gave me all of this information about the wireless carriers and how much each of them are paying. It gave me some notes on methodology. It gave me some assumptions. Then it came back and said, well, this is what we would expect these carriers to be paying per tower. Which, that's interesting. Now, what's really interesting is they're all exactly the same, and I know for a fact they're not all going to be exactly the same because there's all different types of contracts involved, there's different types of loading involved on these towers, so I know this is an extrapolation, but this doesn't match the numbers that came back on Perplexity. So now I've gone to two different sources hoping I get a similar result, and I didn't. In fact, it really was different. And I came back and I asked it for a little bit more information. But this was the critical piece that I was looking for, because these numbers are dramatically different than the numbers that I was given over here. So I came back and I said, well, here's Copilot's numbers, and I had to copy and paste it in an image format, and Perplexity did a great job in actually reading the image I put in. And I said, well, here's what I'm being told. Why is it, or actually I told you, here's the analysis from Copilot. Please check the math based on industry averages and American Tower's financials. Does it make sense? And it came back and it told me, well, it is accurate. Well, how can that be accurate when you just told me that the numbers up here were more accurate? And we're talking a $10,000 spread. And it said, well, these are accurate. So the prompt then was, why did you come up with different numbers in the earlier analysis? And I gave it an image here, and it said, well, great question. And it came back and told me, well, this was my approach, this was Copilot's approach. My approach says the average is 2.5 to 2.7. Copilot's approach reports the rent per carrier, but since most towers are single tenant in these carrier counts, this figure closely matches the per tenant. This is all becoming mumbo jumbo, and this is where Perplexity was starting to make stuff up. And this is a big deal with some of these large language models, or some of the AIs that you may put data into, is if it does not understand your prompt, or if it's not quite getting accurate information, we hear rumors of it making things up. And in this case, it is making stuff up. So it gives me a summary reference here, and it says total portfolio averages, and it gives me their number, Perplexity's number. Then it comes back to Copilot's number and says, well, the carrier estimates, big three, that is this much. And it's justifying, it's presenting its information, kind of like I used to do when I was in high school. If I didn't understand the question, I would kind of make up a lot of information that sounded good, but it wasn't based on anything factual. So what I had to do was I attached Copilot's table per carrier information. I told it to check this against SEC earnings, verify the numbers, revise the table to show the anticipated rent per wireless carrier. Verify if the total equals the average rent per tower. And it comes back and it goes through here and it tells me, well, the average rent per tower on American Tower US sites is $114,000. The average rent per this is $2,700. Where's this discrepancy? And again, it starts coming back with semi-made up information. So then I had to give it another prompt to redirect it, because it's locked in on its numbers. What I noticed was it's locked in. It says, well, this has to be factual, therefore it's going to come up with different conclusions. So the prompt this time became different. It said, it's quite possible that Copilot's numbers were inaccurate. Now, the reason that I thought they may be inaccurate is I didn't tell Copilot to go get anything factual. I just told it to go get the information. And I said, typically the major carriers pay higher rent than other tenants. And this is because Copilot was trying to explain it away, and it was explaining away the difference by saying, well, the other tenants must be paying more. In this case, I know that's not the fact. So I told it, assume that Copilot, or believe that Copilot's numbers may be inaccurate. Wireless carriers may pay higher rent than other tenants. Check the SEC filings to see if wireless carriers' gross revenues are specifically identified. If not, assume the incomes are underreported and revise the table accordingly. This is where it got real interesting. Perplexity changed its tune. It said American Tower's SEC filings do not specifically break out wireless carriers as a revenue line item, meaning that the numbers that Copilot came up with were made up. They were coming from somewhere else. And not necessarily made up, but from a source that is not verifiable. Instead, the property revenue is aggregated across all tenant types, and then it goes into a whole lot more information, but it tells me why Copilot's carrier figures are likely understated. Again, now it's changing from justifying the information to verifying the information and finding that it's not accurate. SEC filings group all tenants together, but it's well documented that major wireless carriers generally pay higher rent. Note, that's my direction to Perplexity. It's now taking that as fact, and it's using that as a baseline. Interesting that it's not verifying it as I asked it to, it's just believing it. Copilot's numbers show average tenant or per tower rents around $27,000 per year, which is equivalent to market-wide blended averages, justifying, again, its prior statements, not the premium rates paid by national carriers for high-value towers. U.S. wireless towers often host multiple tenants, each paying a premium for primary macro tower placements, etc., etc., and it revises the table then to say, well, these are the implied averages. Other tenants are likely in this range. It does give us numbers on AT&T, T-Mobile, but again, this is using information that is not factual. But then the conclusion comes down to if Copilot's carrier rent estimate is low, actual carrier rents may be closer to this range, portfolio Y averages this range, and then I had to give it another prompt finally. Do your numbers above equal the average rent per tower based on the number of tenants per tower and revenue per tower? Now again, I'm asking it to verify specific facts. Do your numbers equal this? Is this the average? And then it gives me this. Copilot rent tenants added up to 129% of all tenants in the American Tower portfolio, which is mathematically impossible. Interesting. Copilot rents sum up as a portfolio average, lower than the average, lower than the actual, because the actual was higher than $94,000. It was in the $114,000 range. Lower than the actual, but higher than Copilot's table value, and still less than the SEC calculated all revenue average. The number in Copilot's table, when some do not match the true portfolio-wide average rent, they understate carrier rent per site. The actual carrier rents are likely higher than reported by Copilot, especially since major carrier occupancies typically drive the above average revenue. So what you see in this statement, these last three statements are when given information, the AIs try to take the information as factual. They try to take it as this is actual factual information. When asked to verify the information specifically by source, that's where things start to fall apart. I thought this was a great exercise in how to get to the bottom of some information, but it shows the lack of trust that we need to have with some of these AI models until they improve the fact verification piece of it. What I'm seeing in just these statements is, number one, it's still taking some of the information as important that I provided it from Copilot, and then it's also still taking some of the information right here that I gave it as factual without verifying that as well. So if you're using this for homework, if you're using this for research, if you're using this for studies, for whatever it may be, it's great for crunching the data. It's great for going out and giving you, if you give it a hard source and say, read this, it will go out and read that. But you've got to make sure that it's not verifying or that it's not using some other information without actually verifying it. I thought that was cool. I thought it was very insightful to what you see with these AI models. I'm still impressed every day by what they're able to do. It's amazing some of the prompts you can get, and what I found is the prompt is key when you're going out and looking for information from an AI source. So make sure you are utilizing that information to your advantage and you are not getting burned by trusting an AI to do bad research because it was given bad prompts. I hope this is helpful to you. If it is, please give us a like down below. If you'd like to see more content like this, do consider subscribing to the channel. And if you know someone this may benefit, do share. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one.